Think back on the best boss fights in gaming. Maybe you think of the brutal difficulty of, well, basically all of the Dark Souls bosses. Maybe you think of the show-stopping power fantasy of Zelda's Colossus. Maybe you think of the mind-blowing fourth wall break of Psycho Mantis. Or you could just play Monster Hunter, a series that offers basically all of these and so much more. A series with the most creative, fantastical, and engaging boss fights in all of gaming. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. It's easy to get overwhelmed when looking at the monster list for a Monster Hunter game. After all, games post-DLC easily give you over 70 monsters to hunt. That's not even getting to Generations Ultimate, which cracks well over 100 monsters. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Rathalos is a typical dragon. Actually, it's a wyvern. Like I said, Rathalos is a typical wyvern. It flies and breathes fire. Diablos is a wyvern that's basically a bull, so it charges at you and has large horns. And Velocidrome is, well, a velociraptor. But as you get further and further into the game, you start to realize how incredible the boss design is in the series. Let's take a look at Brachydios to start. Okay, he's a blue lizard thing with some green highlights. Nothing too crazy there. Oh, but we're just getting started. Brachydios is defined by two omnipresent design elements: his slime and boxing. When Brachy's are young, they form a symbiotic relationship with this green slime. The slime on its own is very volatile, but by clinging to Brachy's body, it stabilizes. This is where Brachy's horn and signature arms come into play. Brachy's a punchy boy. Its fight is based heavily around a boxer, and it moves around you how you would expect a boxer to move during its fight. It has combinations that will strafe around you and is constantly repositioning itself to find an opening. Uppercuts, jabs, hooks are all integrated into its moveset, and all of these attacks leave a puddle of slime on the ground. But because the slime has now left its body, it becomes unstable and will explode after a certain amount of time. All of these things really put you into a corner. You have to play extremely mobile against Brachydios. At least in my experience, heavy weapons do awful against it, especially because of its signature ailment, Slime Blight. By simply stepping into the slime, it'll stick onto you. The only way to prevent it from exploding is by rolling 5 times to get it off you. It's a fast, high-octane fight that always keeps you on your toes. Fortunately, you have a lot of options to deal with Brachy. Breaking its arms and horn will neuter its slime attacks, and exhausting it will make it harder for it to recoat its arms with slime. Namiel is another amazing design. It's based on bioluminescent jellyfish and looks amazing. I feel like it really needed to be introduced in World to take advantage of the better hardware. And since it's based on a jellyfish, it's one of the few monsters that's able to take advantage of multiple elements: water and electric. There are multiple phases to the fight: dry, wet, and charged. The fight begins in the wet phase. It will spew puddles across the area. These puddles don't do much on their own, and they can even be absorbed with bright moss, but they come into play during the charged phase. Namiel will begin integrating electric attacks into its moveset, which electrify the puddles. It gets a lot more aggressive, deals more damage, and it will eventually use its Nova, a sort of super move in Monster Hunter. It'll dive bomb the area and just charge everything and dry up all the puddles. This will take it into the dry state. This is your best chance to deal a ton of damage. It becomes almost lethargic and its hit zones are noticeably better. So you're constantly rotating through these different phases, which are denoted not only by Namiel's appearance, but also its attacks. It's a really unique fight that's not particularly hard, but immensely enjoyable. But the real multi-element challenge in World is the Elatrion fight. This is the most mechanic-heavy fight in the series. So Elatrion is the avatar of the Monster Hunter universe. It has control over all 5 elements: fire, water, electric, ice, and dragon? I don't really understand the last 2, but you know what, let's roll with it. Like Namiel, it rotates through 3 main phases: ice active, dragon active, and fire active. Your elemental damage will change based on the phase, and you need to deal enough elemental, not just total, damage in order to survive its Nova, the Eschaton Judgment. This attack will one-shot you if you didn't meet the damage threshold. After Eschaton, Elytron will shift to Ice Active if you started with Fire, or shift to Fire Active if you started with Ice Active. However, if you're able to break its horns before Eschaton, it will be unable to shift. So it's a massive race against the clock to not only meet the elemental DPS threshold, but also break its horns. Because if you don't, your weapons won't deal enough damage in the next phase and you'll wipe. And then there's, I guess, another DPS threshold. You can only break the horns up to 2 times. After that, they can't be broken any further, so Elytron will always shift elements. Throughout all of this, you can actually brute force your way through the fight. You have 3 carts before you fail the quest, so you have the option to use raw weapons and just cart during Eschaton. It's not a very good strategy because you're leaving very little room for error, but it's an option for better players. It's an incredible fight that forces you to take into account so many things not only during the fight, but also while prepping for it. Going back to some lower tier monsters is one of my favorite fights in Generations Ultimate, Celtis Queen. Early on, you'll encounter just the normal Celtis, and it's really a pushover. It doesn't do much, it's not very threatening, and Celtis Queen does up the ante a little bit. She's much larger and more threatening, but still nothing too crazy here. Until the male Celtis comes to her aid. The two combine and now you're in for a real treat. She gets a big boost in mobility and is much more threatening. Even though this tag team threat is an incredibly satisfying fight, what really stood out to me about this fight was Celtis Queen killing her male counterpart. When tired, she'll take Celtis, slam him onto the ground, and proceed to eat him. It's really shocking. It's a really memorable fight too. Neopterons, aka insect monsters, are pretty rare in the series, so seeing even more creative use of this idea is so satisfying. And another insect boss from GU is the final boss, Atal-Ka. Throughout the game, you hear murmurs of a walking fortress decimating the landscape. The guild finally tracks it down, you accept the quest and hop into a massive arena to find a mantis. Okay, it's a cool design and all, but really? After you deal enough damage, it threads its silk across the arena and, from the depths of the sand, emerges an enormous mech, the Empress's throne. I was so excitedly shocked and terrified when I first saw it. And so you scale up the mech, breaking the cocoons along the way until it's finally destroyed. Atal-Ka appears once more, but this time wielding Dragonators. The mech phase occurs once more and you're greeted with proof of a hero and Atal-Ka's final phase, this time weaponizing a massive wheel. It's not a super hard fight, especially for a final boss, but it's one of the most satisfying fights in the series. It's a grand spectacle, and honestly, seeing Atal-Ka, eyes glowing, wheel at the ready, proof of a hero blasting, gives me goosebumps even after farming the fight countless times. And of course you have Valstrax. Man, GU really had some bangers. This is my favorite fight in the series. It's such a wild, out there design that works so well. The Argent Comet is really simple. It's a dragon with jet engine wings. And the whole fight really revolves around its utilization of these wings. It's zipping around the arena and charging at you, which isn't unusual. Diablos and Rathian do this all the time. But Valstrax is so much more explosive because of the speed. It can reshape its wings to give it more range, and its Crimson Glow variant in Sunbreak is able to fire massive lasers from its wings. There's even an intake on its chest. It'll occasionally stop to suck in air through this intake. If you deal enough damage during this animation, the air will ignite and you'll get a knockdown. But of course, everyone's favorite attack, the Dive Bomb. Valstrax will fake leaving the area, circle around the arena high up in the sky, and dive bomb you. It deals tons of damage, if not outright killing you. But my favorite part is that the music stops right after the attack, and you're left with nothing but the sound of your ears ringing. The whole fight is such an amazing standout in terms of monster and fight design. It's such a fast-paced hunt, and I was so excited when Valstrax got announced for Rise. Of course, Rise has its share of amazing hunts. The final boss, Narwa, and this is the real final boss, Allmother, are exceptional fights. I feel like I'm one of the few people who actually really likes this fight, but I feel like it's great because of how well it takes advantage of Rise's inherent mechanics. The wire bugs were a big addition and greatly increased mobility, so seeing Narwa take advantage of that, and in turn a siege fight, which are typically the most boring fights in the series, into one where you have actual initiative was so refreshing. Instead of just loading up cannons and firing them like with Zora Magdaros, you're zipping around from floating cannon to floating cannon trying to avoid attacks, all while having a normal arena hunt in between. And the All-Mother fight really amps things up. It's surprisingly difficult and really turns the hunt into more of a bullet hell. All-Mother's attacks have massive hitboxes and vary in strength and speed. While the wire bugs are utilized less in this fight, you get the most hype use of wyvern riding in the entire game. During your first hunt, Magnamalo will jump down into the pit with you and you can wyvern ride it. I was really surprised to hear that most people didn't enjoy these fights very much and preferred the Geismagorm fight. Honestly, I was the exact opposite. I thoroughly enjoyed both of Narwa's forms and thought Geismagorm was pretty typical. But enough about that. The final monster I'm going to look at is none other than the infamous Black Dragon himself, Fatalis. In a world filled with all of these fantastically creative beasts, you'd think that the final boss of the original Monster Hunter and of World would be something really special, something so insanely creative and unique that it would be instantly memorable. You would be completely and utterly wrong. Fatalis is nothing more than a dragon, a very historically accurate representation of Western dragons. It flies and it breathes fire, and that is exactly why Fatalis is so terrifying. It feels so real. And while other monsters have ecology rooted in real-world biology, Fatalis feels like something that could actually exist. Fatalis feels like something that could actually have erased a kingdom in a single night. Even in-game, everyone is terrified by Fatalis. Records are almost completely erased and are nothing more than a legend or myth at this point. Before World, Fatalis never even had an official render, let alone an icon, which played into the mysticism of it. And the fight is brutally difficult. There's a handful of specific mechanics, but mostly just hard, just like his design. Straightforward, simple, but brutally terrifying. This is such a small taste of Monster Hunter's brilliance. When writing this script, I really only intended to talk about 3 monsters, similar to talking about 3 of the weapons. But the more I wrote, the more I wanted to talk about. Even now, some of my favorites are noticeably absent from this list. Zinogre, Velkhana, Kushala, well, Rise Kushala, Gore and Shigaru Magala, and so many more. It's incredible how memorable these monsters' designs and fights are. They're really like the characters of this series. And that puts Capcom in an interesting position where they can reuse old characters without the games feeling repetitive or redundant. And some of these are so iconic and instantly recognizable. So let's play a quick game of Who's that monster? Who's that monster? How about this one? Exactly, it's Diablos. Or this one. Yeah, it's Rajang. Even their roars are recognizable. Everyone who's played World knows this one. It's Legiana. This is the second of a 4-part series that I've decided to call Monster Hunter May. I'll be releasing a new video each week, so go check them out if I haven't bored you to death. Anyway, Monster Hunter's monsters are so incredibly creative and truly one of a kind. They are one of the many highlights of this series and will always keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching.